Hey guys, welcome to this webinar on layback. First off, if you like what you see, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and let's get it going. Layback is something I think most pitchers take for granted, but on the contrary, layback is a major player in achieving high velocities and a key player in most elite throwers achieving those high velocities, but needs to be attained in the correct way in order to keep the elbow and the shoulder healthy. While most players achieve velocity in different ways with many different types of mechanics, I think one common denominator that we see with elite throwers is their ability to get that arm in a great, efficient, laid-back position when throwing the ball. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about why layback is important and some things we can do to help get that arm in a good laid-back position. Much of the information in this webinar is based off of our pitching video analysis that grabs from 60 different data points, both from our mocap and our video analysis, as well as our strength and conditioning assessment on the table, as well as strength testing in the weight room. Layback takes place just after stride foot contact and signifies the end of hip and shoulder separation. But it's not just about shoulder ER alone, which many people believe. It's a combination of several things, including good T-spine extension to help get that arm laid back, scapular retraction, or what we know as scap load, shoulder external rotation, of course, and a few other things that we'll talk about in this webinar. All work together to get the forearm back in what is known as the late cocking phase. I'm going to point out a few things here looking at Zach Greinke in regards to other things that can help the arm get into better layback. One is the amount of T-spine extension that he's getting, as you can see right here. You can also tell that he's getting good T-spine extension by the amount that his chest is protruding right here. Another thing is he's getting really great lat length here. That is due to the fact that he doesn't have so much excess tone in his lats, which is helping the arm to eccentrically lay back and also not creating a lot of pull on his lower lumbar. As you can see here, he's got a really straight back. If his lat was tight, we would see a lot of extension in his lower lumbar, which can lead to some debilitating back pain. Having efficient layback allows the athlete to carry that external rotation through the acceleration phase for a longer period of time. This also allows them to produce force for a longer period of time. This lengthening of time helps diminish torque on the UCL. The final velocity of the ball will be dependent upon the distance that arm has traveled through the acceleration phase and the amount of time it takes it to get through that distance, or how quickly it accelerates through that distance. Here is a correlation to velo taken from 500 data points of our mocap system, showing correlation of velocity to degrees of layback. As you can see here, the higher the velocity that is thrown correlates directly to getting more degrees of layback, whereas we look for 160 to 180. Up here you can see our guys that are throwing 85 and higher are hitting those marks. As we can see here with Jacob deGrom, as he's carrying his arm through that acceleration phase, the distance traveled, he gets a nice clean distance before releasing that ball. This is allowing him to apply force for a longer period of time and stay on the ball longer. As we mentioned earlier, getting good layback is not about shoulder external rotation alone. Getting great layback is a combination of several other factors, such as good T-spine extension, lat length, which we're going to talk about in a little bit of detail later, neck flexors, making sure that our neck flexors are not tight, closing down in the acromial space, not allowing us to get overhead more efficiently, and scap retraction, which we know as layback. In other words, while we may see 125 to 135 degrees of layback passively on the table during an assessment, that is not all the factors in charge of giving us a good 170 to 180 that we like to see when we're analyzing pitching video. Here's a piece of the report taken from our mocap lab of one of our guys. You can see here he has 169 degrees of max external rotation. We're looking for between 160 and 180. This puts him in range of what we're looking for. I also want to make a point that more is not always better. Generally 185 to 190 degrees, we can start to see possible signs of hypermobility and instability. Remember, the shoulder is a very unstable joint, and trying to get more is not always better. Can create problems further down the line with the elbow, labrum, and some other things we're going to talk about when we talk about injury reduction. While there are other factors involved, we do need to make sure that a pitcher, when he comes in on day one, does have a good degree of layback and external rotation passively. This is a sample of what we're doing on our assessment using a goniometer, checking. We're generally looking for anywhere between 120 on the low side, 140 on the high side, getting that external rotation passively. I do want to mention that we also would like to see much of that athlete's passive range of motion being able to pick up on their own actively. That way we know that they're able to get that arm into layback, and it's not just bony issues. Some other mechanical disconnects that we see that happen earlier on that could affect an athlete into getting more efficient layback would be muscling up through the arm path. That would be a poor scap load, creating a tight muscle up. You can see athletes a lot of times are just muscling up going into that. They're actually getting too much supination and just throwing their arm back. This can make it difficult for an athlete to get his arm to flip up and whip with ease, with good momentum up into a really nice layback, as well as early trunk rotation and forearm flyout, excess elbow flexion, getting that arm a little too close to the head. We could see it here in our mocap lab as far as early trunk rotation. Once again, from our mocap lab, we're looking for 0 to 10 degrees of trunk rotation at foot plant. Here we show an example of one of our throwers. A lot of times young guys, they can get overly aggressive with that glove side. They can get overly aggressive with turning their hips early. And what happens is it brings landing down early and creates what we call forearm flyout, which makes it extremely hard for the arm to lay back because it's in such a provocative position. By the same token, a late arm at foot plant puts the arm in a really provocative position and makes it very hard, once again, for it to flip up into a good position to actually lay back and accept that force from the leg. Also, it's a precursor for injury because the arm is in such a provocative position to accept those forces on the anterior shoulder. At the point of full layback or max external rotation is a very provocative position and where we can see a lot of things go wrong. This is why it's really important to get good lat tone to help decrease stress on the lat, as well as it will help decel the arm into layback a little quicker, not have it happen quickly and create torque on the ulnar nerve and irritate the Tommy John ligament, labral issues, and lower back issues. The more T-spine extension we can get, the less we have to borrow from the lower lumbar. Some ways that we can acquire better layback safely is by getting a good lead leg decel. This will help us create a nice stable landing, help absorb force quickly, send it up through the chain, and help kick that arm into layback without having to overuse the arm to get there. Another thing is strong external rotators. That's going to help us stabilize the arm in what I said were those provocative positions to help any anterior humeral glide that may happen, as well as eccentric strength and mobility of the bigger internal rotators, more specifically the pec minor and the lat. These two act as they decelerate the arm safely into layback so it's not slamming there, as well as the lat also gives us the slingshot effect of taking the stretch shortening cycle and bringing us back up and through the acceleration phase. Here's an example of Bumgarner, and you can see he's got a nice stable leg at landing. He's not swaying in or out from side to side. It's allowing him to stop, transfer that force up, and get a nice arm, kick his arm into a nice layback so he can then, from there, bring it across into the acceleration phase, apply force on that ball, get late arm speed, and more velocity. Another way we can work on getting that layback and preserving it is during the off season, once throwing starts. Early off season, we're not throwing and we're losing some external rotation and we're gaining that IR that we lost during the season. Later on, when throwing starts, weighted balls, and the use of bullpens, we're constantly throwing that arm back into the layback position, and we're starting to gain more of that ER just through stretching that arm out through the activity of throwing. Another question a lot of people ask is, should we stretch it? I'm not a huge fan of stretching into external rotation. We don't know why that layback is not happening. We do not know why you do not have a lot of external rotation maybe on your assessment. So simply going in and stretching it, generally when we have guys, they're experiencing tightness, we'll try some manual therapy or some myofascial release on the internal rotators. But other than that, we generally will refer out if we have a guy who's just not getting good layback, not getting max ER. It's his external rotation passively is low and it's not getting any better. We'll usually refer out for that. Some things we can do in the weight room, talking about the neck flexors, as I was speaking about earlier, closing down that acromial space, working on the levator and the sternocleidomastoid are two things we can work on with a lacrosse ball. We generally use this as a C in our ABC, in our groupings of our exercises. Instead of standing around waiting for a break, we'll actually do some soft tissue work on the neck flexors, and we'll also work on lower trap and serratus mobility and strength. Here we're seeing one of our throwers working on lower trap as well as serratus with a wall slide with rotation. Another thing we can do here is limit heavy weight in the hands. That's going to cause a lot of scapular downward rotation. So when throwing starts, we generally have our guys, heavy trap bar deadlifting is out of the program. We'll move more to a hip lift or a hip bridge, and as well as generally these guys are working more on a power phase where the weight is not as heavy anyway, but if they are using heavy weight, we'll transfer that to a hip bridge to keep that weight out of their hands, as well as working on that eccentric strength that I was talking about within the 90-90 position. Here we could see this athlete, he's pulling the band back to helping him get into that position, and then he's resisting for about a 5 to second 8 count where he's working on eccentrically strengthening the external rotators, which will help him decelerate the throw and also stabilize him in layback in that provocative position. So these are some reasons why layback is important, some things you can do in the weight room from both a soft tissue side and a mobility side and a strength training side. If you like what you saw, once again, please don't hesitate to click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thanks a lot for tuning in. See you on the next one. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. If you're interested in our training material on pitching, hitting, or strength training, you can reach us at rocklandpeakperformance.com or on Twitter and Instagram at RPP_baseball. You can also call our front desk at 201-308-3363 or email us at rpp@rocklandpeakperformance.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel on the way out.